So here's what we've earned on Monday, here's what we've earned on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Black Friday, and so forth. So off the back of that, we're able to do quite a lot of number crunching and shove it all into a load of slides to show you what's actually going on during Black Friday, and also predict what might happen in future Black Fridays. So what you're about to see is a selection of that data to actually give you some clues as to what's going to happen this year and what has been happening in the past. So let's start with what happened last year and the year before. This chart is going to show you year-on-year growth for the 8 days around the Black Friday week. So you've got Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Black Friday there, Saturday, Sunday, and then Cyber Monday. And all of the retailers that give us their data, we add it up. Collectively, this is what their performance was during 2020, the year of the pandemic. It was a fantastic Black Friday week during the pandemic. Unsurprisingly, e-commerce exploded during the pandemic, and Black Friday was a whopper, 38% year-on-year growth. That was the best Black Friday that we've ever reported. 12 months later, in 2021, the year-on-year growth looked like this. Not very good, unfortunately. These two lines represent every retailer in our panel combined. So that is all those names that I mentioned, plus more. And now you've got quite a hard benchmark, basically, for that green line to try and grow from. That's why it was negative. But we can show you what that looks like by different product categories. So same idea, similar setup of year-on-year growth on the y-axis there, 8 days across the middle. These are 4 major categories. So when we get sent that data by retailers, we can split it out to say, here's what clothing retailers have earned, and here's what home and garden retailers have earned. In pink, that's health and beauty. In green, it's home and garden. And in grey, it's electricals. They all had a fairly terrible year last year for year-on-year growth over the Black Friday week. The only category that managed to just scrape something positive was clothing. Now, if you want some extra detail here, we do have it. You might not be able to see all the detail here, but we can break it out into even more categories. If you can't see that from the back, don't worry. The general gist is that everything was a bit rubbish, unless you were selling clothes. Home and garden, for example, you've got garden furnishings, homewares and accessories, furniture, had a rubbish time. But the problem is, what you're being compared against is literally the most lucrative period in online retail ever. So when you come to 2021 and you say, how did we do? The main thing you're going to look at is a year-on-year growth figure, and it's going to look quite bad. But that's because it's being compared against 2020. So why? It's very easy to say, yes, it was down against the pandemic, but why? Why didn't it actually do as well? So we went digging into the numbers and looked at a couple of key things that might possibly suggest why the market just didn't do as well in 2021. The first thing we looked at was average basket value. Were people spending just less per transaction in 2021 in comparison to 2020? Along the bottom here, you've got all the different product categories that we are tracking. And we're going to show you a line for 2020. That's what the average spend was at each of those categories per transaction. So this is saying, for example, in the home and garden market right here, the average spend over the Black Friday week was just over 150 quid. Fast forward 12 months, this is what the average basket value looked like again. And there's not a lot of difference there. It's very, very similar. In fact, if you were to average it out, there was just £7 difference. That's nothing, by the way. 7 quid is not a lot in comparison to the entire market average basket value. So, people were spending the same amount per transaction. But what about their conversion rate? Were they just spending less frequently? Was it not happening as often? Let's do the same thing. This is the average conversion rate during the Black Friday week for each of those product categories. And this is 2022. Again, not a massive amount of difference. If you can't see this graph at the back, The general gist, there's not a huge difference between 2020 and 2021. The only one that managed to do something interesting was furniture. In fact, if you were to average it out, the difference in those conversion rates was just 0.3 of a percentage point between the 2 years. So we know people were spending at the same rate. We know they were spending the same amount. So why didn't retailers make as much money? And the reason is there was just fewer of them. Traffic. This is the year-on-year change in the traffic to retailers' websites during the Black Friday week. There were just less people shopping online in 2021 than there were in 2020. And the answer behind that is very obvious if you haven't already twigged. The reason the traffic was down is because the high street was open. In 2020, the high street was shut. Online retail had retail to itself. 12 months later, it had to compete, and what you ended up with was about an 11% difference in actual shoppers. So, what does that mean for this year? Well, the high street is going to be open, and the market, in case you haven't worked out, isn't great right now. We've got a little slide in a second that's actually going to show you a forecast. But before we get to that, I've got something quite interesting to show you around planning your discount. If you are thinking about running a Black Friday sale, your first question is probably going to be, how long should we run it? How many days should our campaign be? Now the thing is, the longer you run your campaign, the more diluted the share of revenue across that period is going to be. The Black Friday day itself is the most kind of revenue generating day in nearly every retailer's calendar. So you want to know quite a lot what the impact is going to be on that biggest day by running a longer or shorter campaign. And we have the data to show you what that actually looks like. So we took a load of retailers and we're going to plot how many days their Black Friday sale actually lasted. And then along the bottom, we're going to show you the share that the big day itself represented out of all the money that they made during their Black Friday campaign. And what we were hoping when we were plotting this graph is that there will be a lovely pattern that says the longer you run your campaign, the smaller the share is for your Black Friday day. And marvellously there was. There was an actual pattern. Now a lot of cameras are coming out. I would recommend taking a photograph of this because later on you can use it. That trend line allows you to go, okay, if I reduce my sale by just 5 days, what is the impact going to be on how much money the big day itself is going to generate me? That will be able to help you know, flexibility-wise, how the impact is going to be on your business. Everyone got the photos changed? Okay, last thing before I hand over to Paul, is we've made a forecast. At IMRG, we get lots and lots and lots of market data from retailers. It represents about 26 billion quid a year in online retail for the UK. So there's enough numbers there for us to kind of robustly say what we think is going to happen. And we have made a forecast for a bunch of different product categories. So this one here is total market. This is clothing, health and beauty, home and garden, and electricals. This is what the Black Friday week looked like for each of those categories last year. We got the calculators out, we did a load of forecasting, did some math, and this is what we think is going to happen this year. The big number, ladies and gentlemen, is minus 5% year on year. It ain't great, I must apologise. I'd love to be able to say, oh, it's going to be 20% plus, but no. Online retail right now is kind of struggling to get positive growth. We haven't seen any single month have positive year-on-year growth for a year and a half in online retail out of our panel. So for the week itself, minus 5% feels about right. Now that is the end of the first little section. I'm going to hand over to Paul now, but coming back, I will be back in about 10 minutes, and we've got some wicked stuff around when you should start your campaign and what sort of discount you should be offering. But please, welcome Paul from Cashflows. He's got something interesting to tell us about Black Friday.
Good afternoon, everybody. So as Matthew said, I'm Paul Clarke. I'm Product Innovation Head for Cashflows. I'll give you a little bit of background on Cashflows and who we are and why, hopefully, we can add a little bit to the conversation today. So Cashflows is a payments business. I say payments business rather than card acquirer because we deal with all kind of payment acceptance. Based in the UK, been going for about 10 years or so with some European presence. And the reason we differentiate, and this isn't a sales pitch, it's really just hopefully give you some idea of why we think we've got something relevant to say today. But the reason we as a business differentiate is we spend a huge amount of time when it comes to payments trying to understand the markets we operate in, the sectors our customers operate in, and our customers. We spend a lot of time, energy, money trying to get underneath those through surveys, through talking to our customers, understand what are those trends and what is it payments and a payments company might be able to do to help and influence some of those trends. So I'm not here to talk about, from a retail point of view, what you guys could do. Who am I to say that? But actually, as the payment piece is a very important part of the whole retail journey. One of the things that you can do that will help that journey, particularly at times like Black Friday, as we've already heard, this Black Friday, the forecasts are that it's going to be possibly tougher than ever to make those sales. And I don't think that's just true of Black Friday, I think that's true of all commerce at the moment. Some of the uncertain times that we're living in, things that are happening around various markets, very, very difficult from an e-com point of view and a retail point of view in general. So when you actually put the effort in, get a customer to your store, to your site, how do you make sure you convert? How do you make sure you do everything you can possibly do to connect and convert that sale? That's what we focus on. I'll hopefully give you a few thoughts and insights into things that we've seen that might help that as we go. So, I don't have very many slides. In fact, there's 2 slides. So, bear with me. I've talked a little bit about cash flows, let's say. When we think about, when we've done all that and we talk to our customers about what are the things that you can feasibly do that are going to help convert sales, make more of all of those visits that come to your site, to your store, we think there's really 4 key trends that you need to focus on that can really make a difference. And I'm just going to walk through some of those, give a few examples of the types of things that can make a difference. First of all, flexibility. So making sure that you are flexible in how you give your offering to your consumers is critical. Consumers are increasingly getting more and more discerning in terms of where they want to shop, how they want to shop, and how they want to pay for stuff. So we often say meeting your customer or your consumer where and how they want to pay for stuff is really, really important. Whether that's the sector that they want to pay for stuff in, the channel, online, whether it's mobile, whether it's social, making sure that you have those capabilities, but also the capability to convert and offer a consistent experience at those points of sale is really, really important. Not just the channels that you might want to sell through, but the ways that you could sell stuff, the payment capabilities that you can use to enable those transactions to happen. Cards is still the predominant way that people will pay for stuff, for sure, but increasingly there's more and more ways that people want to pay for things, and that can vary by channel, by sector, by industry sector, whether it's increasing use of open banking to pay for things, whether it's buy now, pay later, and various different forms of that. Ensuring that at the point where your customer has gone through the process of wanting to buy, to put something in the basket, is ready to now transact, you give them the most flexible way of them doing that is really important to making that conversion for that extra mile. So flexibility is really, really important. Your payments company should be talking to you about how you can get flexible and how you can provide these capabilities to your consumers. If they're not, then you need to go talk to your payments company to figure out how they can help you with that. It's easier than it sounds sometimes. Consistency. What do I mean by that? So it's really, really important to give a consistent checkout experience and a consistent way for people to pay for stuff. Let me give you a really good real-life world example of where I've struggled with this before, where I've had an inconsistent experience and where that's had a real impact on my ability to wish to want to buy something. So I'm a creature of habit. I'll actually use the same payment card, Amex. I get points for it. I can use it for air miles. So I'll use Amex wherever I can. I also tend to shop with my big purchases at the same stores. So supermarket, for example, I'll buy from the same store regularly all the time. I'll go in store, I'll go online, and I used to use all the mobile capabilities for my particular chosen in-store brand. I used to go back there because I built an affinity with that brand over a period of time. That's where I'd shop. Around March, April time, when the new 3D Secure rules came in, I found I couldn't use my Amex card on the mobile app of the supermarket that I wanted to buy for. The way it had been applied by the payment part behind that and by the company meant that I couldn't use it. I could still go into store and use my Amex card, but I couldn't use it on my mobile app, and that's how I wanted to buy stuff. So I talked to the company, I won't name them, but I talked to the company, and there was an issue around how they'd implemented some new Amex scheme rules that made a difference for those customers who wanted to use Amex on the mobile app. They asked me to use a different card. So I thought about it, and I wasn't going to use a different card. I wanted to use my Amex card. So I used a different store to do my weekly shopping that week, and then every single week after that. They may well, that was back in March, they may well have fixed that issue, but I don't know, because I've not been back. Because it was just easy for me to switch to a different store with a similar offering, but allowed me to continue to do things the way I wanted to do it. Great example, I think, of how making sure that if you offer an experience in-store, online, and in mobile environment, I think the application of that is consistent, and the journey that your consumers get is consistent all the way through it. Security is a really, really important piece of how do you enable and convert more and more sales. Making your site secure is an obvious one, for sure. Consumers want to make sure they're buying in a secure way. But how you implement security is where the key is. There's a lot of noise at the moment, it has been for quite some time, around 3D Secure 2.0 or SCA, or a number of different words for how you apply the new version of 3D Secure. And actually, from an initial start where there was a few teething issues, the conversion rate of 3D Secure transactions at the moment is around about 92%, which is not that bad compared to where it was before. But the experience of how that 3D Secure challenge is offered from site to site can make a really, really big difference in terms of how consumers interact with it. So ensuring of that 92%, there's two questions that come out of that for me. Of that 92%, does your store convert transactions at 92%? Because that's the average. If you're finding that you're getting through a checkout and less than that are actually completing, there's some issue with how you're implementing it. There's a number of ways that you can do that. The experience you can give your consumers around how you deliver that challenge capability to them can have a major impact on how they complete and whether they complete the basket. So if you look at your numbers and you're not getting 92% completion or higher, I would ask or suggest that something's wrong in terms of how that's been implemented. It could be improved, and it could be improved significantly. So how you're applying that from a security point of view is really, really important. The other thing for me is the remaining 8% of that 92. So 92% complete, 8% don't today. Of that 8%, some in the region of about a quarter of that don't complete because the transactions are flagged incorrectly, somewhere between the merchant and the payment company. It's not because the cards are declined, or people don't have the money, or there's any issues with the card. It's been flagged incorrectly. A quarter of that 8%, which is probably about 2% of all transactions, think about that, decline because of how we, as a collective industry, are flagging those transactions. I'm going to give you an example. Any transaction under 30 euros doesn't have to have a challenge. Lots of times I'm still going onto sites where I'm buying things under 30 euros and I'm being asked to challenge and being asked to put a challenge in and complete 3D Secure. That's a really good reason why people will disappear and move away from a site. So again, I would suggest that one of the ways to get people to your site to increase conversion, think about how you're applying things like 3D Secure. There's a really simple flag that you can put into your back end that would enable you to solve a lot of those problems. Your payments company will know this, they should be able to work with you on it, but I think that's one of the things that from a retail point of view I'd be looking at to make sure that we're making that conversion all the time, every time. And then the final thing out of the four things that we look at, I suppose, is optimization. So how do you make sure you're optimizing the journey that your consumer is having as they're going through your site? What's happening at the point where they check out? We've done a huge amount of research, we've spent a lot of time talking to our customers and consumers to understand at what points in the journey are people dropping out. Today still, you guys will know this better than me, 60-70% of all baskets never complete. They drop out before completion. And a lot of that's because consumers decide to go somewhere else. They've only just got to that journey when maybe never intended to complete. But a huge number of those is because they're not liking the experience they're getting. Whether that's they're getting to the point where they check out and they find out delivery charges are different than they thought they were. They're being asked to sign into an account before they can complete. Something's different and something's creating a barrier to them completing that transaction. So thinking about the experience that consumers are having as they go through that site is really, really important. We spend a lot of time looking at that, we work with our customers, helping them map and design that process through that checkout to make it as sleek and as impactful as possible as they're going through that. Even using things like data. There's a lot of information that your payment company will have, a lot of data that would help get that conversion rate higher. For example, when an issuer declines a credit card, they'll send a code back to the payment company and to you guys. That code will explain why a transaction's been declined. Sometimes it's basically just there was a network error, the internet was down, something didn't complete. On that basis, you should be able to just represent it, the transaction should get represented easily. That doesn't happen anywhere near often enough. What tends to happen is the transaction doesn't continue and fails. There's ways you can use that data to just represent that stuff simply that would mean that your conversion rate would increase and your optimization would improve from a consumer point of view. So all of these things, 4 key areas that I would argue you need to focus on. They're relatively small fixes, but some of these things can have 1, 2, 3, 4% improvement in basket rate conversion. And at a point when e-com's dropping off, retail sales are harder than ever to get, getting people to your site and through the point where you want them to complete is getting harder and harder. When they do get there, you want to make sure you're giving them every opportunity you can to complete that transaction. So hopefully just a few insights for the stuff that we see from a payments point of view. I'd suggest you go talk to your payment provider about any of this if they haven't talked to you about it already. If they don't want to talk to you about it, then go talk to somebody else.